Hello students, I welcome you to another lesson, Communication Skills, BUCU 001. Your facilitator is Mary Muindi. Now, this lesson, we are going to begin with a recap of our previous lesson. The previous lesson, we focused on the types of communication. And we said that communication is broadly classified into three broad categories. One, according to the number of people involved in the communicative process. So, if we have two or more people communicating, we call that interpersonal communication. Number two, we also said that communication can be classified according to the medium of communication. This is the means by which a given message is conveyed. And a medium of communication, we said that communication could be verbal, it could be non-verbal. And I said that 65% of any communication is usually non-verbal. Non-verbal basically has to do with your physical appearance, your body orientation, your facial expression, eye contact, the gestures you use, and your posture. How do you stand when you are talking to people? You are supposed to maintain an upright posture where your weight is well distributed. And there are some postures, especially with men, who like talking when they pocket. That one is not allowed in communication because pocketing could mean something else. And then we also said that communication can be classified according to the flow of information. And the flow of information, we said we have the formal and informal communication networks in any organization. The formal communication networks, they are normally established by an organization and they are usually following a particular hierarchy of command. So we have from the senior to the subordinates. So under flow of information, we said we have what we call downward communication, and then we have what we call upward communication. So when we talk about downward communication, this is a communication, for example, from a CEO of a company to the other staff members down there. And then we said that we need to be careful that in our organization, we don't develop other informal networks of communication that we call grapevine. Grapevine communication will occur when there are some weaknesses in the formal communication network. Or it can also occur due to curiosity of people. People are just curious. And most of the time, they like to talk. What's new? What's happening? Have you heard? Yes, I have heard. That is what we call grapevine or informal communication. We need to be careful that that does not occur in an organization. And how can we ensure that? By ensuring that the formal communication networks are working. So this lesson, we are going to begin by focusing on one of the skills that we had said is important in this particular unit, and that is listening skills. So the lesson overview is, we'll begin by defining what is listening and how does it differ from hearing. 2, we look at the listening process. And then 3, we are going to look at barriers of communication. And then 4, types of listening. And lastly, the techniques that we can use to ensure that we are good listeners. So the lesson objectives. Objective number 1. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to distinguish between listening and hearing. Number 2, describe the listening process. We'll see that listening is a process that is made up of several steps. And then number 3, objective, explain 5 types of listening. And then 4, discuss barriers to effective listening. And lastly, you describe the techniques that we can use to improve our listening skills. So those are the lesson objectives. Next, we are going now to begin by distinguishing between hearing and listening. And therefore, you need to ask yourself, are you listening to me or are you hearing? So what is hearing? Hearing is basically automatic reaction to our nervous system. For example, if there is a bang somewhere, we'll all receive that sound. So in hearing, you receive the sound, but you don't attend to it. There is no concentration in hearing. When it comes to listening, we'll say it is a process of receiving sounds, constructing meaning, and responding to oral stimuli. So we are saying in listening, it's a process. You receive the sound, you attend to it by attaching meaning, and then you respond. So most of the time we listen to any oral stimuli. For example, it could be a preacher, it could be a lecture, so you are listening. So the major difference between listening and hearing is that in hearing, there is no concentration. But in listening, there is total concentration because you want to understand the message that is being communicated. Now, we are going to look at listening as a process made up of several steps. So we begin with the first step that I'm calling select. What do we mean by select? Here is you choose what you want to concentrate on, what you want to pay attention to from the various oral stimuli. We give an example. We are now in class, and we have various oral stimuli. There's a lecturer who is talking. There's a friend who is talking next to you. There's music you can hear from the background. So it is you to choose what you want to pay attention to. That is the first step, which is selection. Number two is interpretation. So you have decided to listen to the lecturer. So you are all listening to me. So what do you mean by interpretation? You try to understand. You try to attach meaning to what is being said. And you need to note that in the process of interpretation, there are several things that can interfere with your interpretation process. And of course, that we'll talk about later on. After now you have attached meaning to what is being said, you evaluate. Yes, I have understood. Mwindi is talking about the listening process. So in evaluation is you try to judge. Is it worthwhile? Is it not worthwhile? Whatever the communicator is saying, does it make sense to you as an individual or it doesn't make sense? So I assume that whatever I'm saying is making sense. So after evaluation, you go to response. The response, this is where now you give what? Feedback. So if a lecturer has been teaching, you have interpreted, you have evaluated. Now the feedback could be you asking questions to seek clarification or even answering questions when they ask. That is the response we are talking about. And then lastly, memory. Memory means try to remember whatever has been said. So you can see that actually listening process is made up of 5 steps. From the listening process, we move to types of listening. And we want to begin with the first one that I know is valued by everyone, including myself, which is appreciative listening. This is a type of listening that you listen for pleasure or for leisure. Sometimes you find that it is your free time or you are bored, so you can listen to music. If you are in the village, you can listen to the murmuring of the river and the singing birds. It's a very romantic aura there. Other types of appreciative listening, you can listen to a motivational talk, etc. We move to the next type of listening that we call comprehensive listening. This is listening with the purpose of understanding. It requires a lot of concentration. And therefore, you need to be physically and psychologically prepared to the listening process. So if you're in the classroom, you want to understand what is being taught in the class. So you are practicing what we call comprehensive listening. And in comprehensive listening, it is always good to take notes. There's a difference between note-taking and note-making. Note-taking is when you write down information from oral sources of communication. So in comprehensive listening, for you to improve your comprehensive listening, you need to take notes. Another type of listening, we call it discriminative listening. What do we mean when we talk about discriminative listening? This is trying to distinguish between when the verbal and nonverbal message is contradicting each other. I give you an example. You meet somebody in the morning and you tell this person, good morning, with a smile. And the person, so gloomy and sad, says, good morning. You can say that whatever, that is what you can discriminate from whatever they have said verbally, it contradicts what you can see from their appearance. And that is, of course, one aspect of discriminative listening. You can also look at discriminative listening as choosing what you want to pay attention to, making a choice. So there are several oral stimuli. So when you decide, for example, in a classroom situation, not to listen to your desk mate, but to listen to the lecturer, that's another aspect of discriminative listening. And then number 4, we have what you call critical listening. This is a type of listening that you do for the purpose of assessment or evaluation. I want to give you an example of critical listening. For example, in a courtroom, the judge will listen to what the witnesses are said before he passes a given, of course, judgment. That is critical listening. You're also listening to somebody who is marketing an item. So you are actually trying to judge, to evaluate whether whatever they are telling you, being one of the advantages of you buying that particular item, it is making a lot of sense or it is not meaningful. And then lastly, the other type of listening, we call it therapeutic listening. Therapeutic listening is also known as emphatic listening. This is a type of listening that you normally listen to somebody to provide some emotional support. For example, in a counseling session, somebody has come to you with a problem, and therefore they need to speak out their problem. So it is called emphatic listening because you try to put yourself in the shoes of that particular person. So if you can see they're actually crying, if you can cry, you also cry with them. That is what we are calling therapeutic or emphatic listening. So what do we do during this particular therapeutic listening? One is that we need to block any distracting stimuli. 2, allow that person to talk through their problem and do not interrupt. Number 3, don't change the topic. Let them pour out their heart. I give you an example. When you join the university, this is BUCU 001, we are teaching first year, first semester. Some of you are in boarding schools, so you have joined Mount Kenya University, and then you meet somebody gives you a date, you become a boyfriend, girlfriend, and then after some time, they tell you it's over. I'm sure all of you have ever been told it's over. It's a very painful. I've been told severally it's over, and it actually breaks my heart. So I hope that your heart is not going to be broken when you find yourself in wrong relationship. But if you find yourself there, then you can go to the counselor. The counselor will counsel you in terms of what you call therapeutic listening. And in therapeutic listening, you can also pat somebody on the back, tell them sorry. Even if it's over, you will get another one. So those are the 5 types of listening. So let us look at some barriers of listening. Barriers to effective listening, barriers to communication mean one and the same thing. So the first barrier to effective listening is listening too hard. What do we mean by that? This is when you want to understand each and everything that is being said by the communicator. There is no way you can understand everything that is being said. Solution for that, in any communicative event, you need to focus on the key or the main points. So don't listen too hard. Don't write everything. When I teach first-year students and I'm talking, they're always busy writing, even where I am joking, even where I'm preaching, and I tell them, just focus on the main point. Another barrier to effective listening is psychological factors. These are mental issues. For example, stress of being told it's over. It could be you are suffering from superiority complex. You feel that you know more than the communicator, and therefore you switch off. You are suffering from inferiority complex. You have low self-esteem. You feel that you are inadequate, and therefore you are not an active listener in the listening process. And then also other psychological could be ego-related. You are a male chauvinist in a patriarchal society that is male-dominated. So when you go to a communicative event and you find that it is facilitated by a woman, then you feel women are the weaker sex. They cannot tell men anything, and therefore you block. That is psychological. Other factors are physical factors in a classroom situation. These are factors that are outside the communicators. They are external factors. For example, high temperatures, low temperatures will actually interfere with your listening process. Other physical factors could be, for example, when somebody is talking next to you, or a phone is ringing close to you, those are physical factors. Other barriers to effective listening, basically we have the semantic factors. Semantics is the study of meaning. And in meaning we said we have what we call the denotative and connotative meaning. The denotative meaning is the exact meaning that you have of a word from the dictionary. And the connotative is basically the associations that you attach to that particular word. So when it comes to interpretation, that is semantics, sometimes you interpret, when somebody says something, you get or you try to perceive it from the connotative angle, but not the denotative angle. I like using these examples in the class, this example, because it excites the students, especially 1.1. That when I come to class in the afternoon, I can say that I'm feeling hot, and they start laughing. And I ask them, surely which hotness could I be talking about in the classroom? Hot from the dictionary means high temperature. So when I say I'm feeling hot, I mean open the windows. That is the perlocution, locutionary act. But there are other meanings or connotations attached to the meaning of hot. Somebody could say that hot means you are feeling that you are beautiful or so. Again, when it comes to semantics, we have what we call ambiguity. Ambiguous constructions. These are constructions that have more than one meaning. So this can also lead to a barrier to effective communication. And again, when it comes to semantics, I'll also talk about the language barrier. That language can be a barrier to communication, especially if the communicator is using complex diction, using a language that is above the level of the communicators. So that one can actually be a barrier. The example I always use is, I don't know whether you have listened to PLO Lumumba. He's fluent, he's eloquent, and he uses, good diction. But many people argue that they don't understand what he's talking about. So that is a language barrier. So I can imagine if PLO Lumumba was the communication skill lecturer, most of you might not understand some of the terminologies that he is using. Why? Because you don't read. We are seriously eroding the reading culture in our society. People don't read. Remember, what you read influences what you speak and what you write. So we need to read so that we can improve on our vocabularies. Another barrier to effective listening is physiological factors. These are biological factors. For example, you come to class and the class began at around 11 and it's around 1. Students will not be listening to you because they are hungry. So hunger is a physiological factor. Other physiological or biological factors could be fatigue or even sickness. So those are some of the barriers. There are many other barriers that we are going to discuss in the e-learning platform. So how do we improve our listening skills? How can we become good listeners? Number one, we need to have a goal or an objective. We ask ourselves, why are we listening? So at the beginning of every listening situation, have a goal or have an objective that will help you to continue listening. Number two, so you set your goals. Number two is you block out any distracting stimuli. Before you engage in any listening situation, first of all, ensure that you are physically prepared, you are psychologically prepared, that even the classroom environment is conducive so that actually you are blocking anything that might interfere with your concentration. And then number three is suspend judgments. When you are listening to somebody, always have an open mind. One of the barriers that I didn't talk about, I said the other barriers that we'll talk about later on, is bias. Whereby you are biased about a communicator. Maybe you don't like the way they do their intonations. You don't like their accent. You know, accent is the way somebody pronounces given words. In English, we have the British accent, we have the American accent. We know that the British accent is rhotic. Rhotic in the sense that we don't pronounce the R in words. We say car. But American English is, British English is non-rhotic. American English is rhotic. And that's why they talk about car. They talk about beard, among other factors. So we are saying that you need to suspend judgments. When somebody opens their mouths, in Kenya we have various accents. We have the Kamba accent, we have the Gikuyu accent, we have the Luo accent. So sometimes, as somebody will start talking, and from their accent, you don't like it at all. Somebody says, for example, get hauti today, we are going to look at, so you switch off. So we are saying, as a good listener, you need to suspend your judgment. Be open-minded. Be ready to listen to somebody. Even if you don't like their intonations, just give them another chance. And then another way of improving our listening skills is focusing on the main points. When you are listening to somebody, it is good to note which are the key points, which are the illustrations. So focus on the key points. And number 5, you need to recognize how a speaker highlights and signposts. To signpost is how do speakers move from one point to another. When you listen to various lecturers, there's a way in which they signal that now they are moving to another point. That is what we call by signposting. Highlighting is, it is important to note. So there they are highlighting what you need to keep in mind, what is crucial in whatever they are discussing. And then other ways of improving listening skills is always take notes. This will help you concentrate. If you then take notes, you will be distracted and you may not understand what is being communicated. And then other other ways of improving our listening skills is you need to be sensitive to what we call meta communication. And I'll talk about the para-linguistic or para-language. That those are aspects of communication that do not concentrate on what is said, but actually the tone, the voice, the pitch, and the stress. Concentrate on somebody's tone or intonation so that at least you can get what they are not telling you. And then paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is basically writing in your own words what the speaker is talking about. And lastly, develop a questioning attitude. That is, always write down questions. Always have questions that you need to be answered at the end of any communicative event. So now we are concluding our lesson. This lesson we have focused on listening skills. Why have we focused on listening skills? Because they are important in any communicative event. Listening, active listening is a soft skill. Many times people are disagreeing, people are conflicting because nobody wants to listen to the other. So I encourage you to become active listeners. Always try to pay attention to what somebody is saying and don't interrupt somebody halfway. Let them finish talking and then you interrupt. So we have distinguished between listening and hearing. And we said that in hearing, you just receive a sound, but you don't attend to it. It's automatic reaction to your nervous system. But in listening, it requires total concentration because you receive a sound, you attach meaning to it, and then you give what? Feedback by responding. And we have said that listening is a process that involves 5 steps. I don't know whether you have gone to any communicative event and you stop at selection, whereby you choose not to listen, but you are there for 3 hours. So let us try to follow the process of listening by selecting. After selecting, of course, you interpret. After interpretation, where you attach meaning, you evaluate, and then you give feedback, and then you try to remember what has been said. And we are focused on 5 types of listening. We have talked about appreciative listening, which is there for entertainment, for leisure, We have talked about comprehensive listening for understanding. We have talked about therapeutic listening that is done for encouraging somebody to talk through a problem or to provide emotional support to somebody. We have talked about critical listening for evaluation purpose. And lastly, we have talked about critical listening for evaluation purpose. So lastly, we have also looked at which are some of the techniques that we can use to improve our listening skills. How can we become better listeners? As I conclude also, the way you sit will tell whether you are an effective listener. Effective listeners sit upright. They don't slouch on the seat. That is something else. And then we said effective listeners should always have a reason, a goal, an objective that will motivate them to continue listening. So those are some of the questions that you can try to look at before we meet in the next lesson. And with those many, many remarks, I want to end with 1 step for happiness. When I teach my classes, I always share with students, how can we live a happier life? How can we always ensure that we are cheerful people? Because we have seen that in communication, you need to convey the right message to your audience. So last week, I think one of the lessons I talked about being grateful. That at the end of the day, you need to sit down and write 3 things that you thank God for. I appreciate that today we have been taught communication skills by Madam Mwindi. I appreciate that I'm alive. So it is you to know what to write down. And today I want to talk about forgiveness. Something that will make you always to be happy is forgiving people who hurt you. God, Allah, invites us to have a forgiving heart. And with those many, many remarks, always make use of non-verbal communication to your own advantage. Thank you.
These televised lectures supplement our robust online learning going on our MKU online platform. You can view more on our televised lectures via our online platform. We are in a digital era, and Mount Kenya University knows this. The following are the steps to follow so as to complete your online application. Download the application form from the website www.mku.ac.ke. Attach copies of your academic certificates and ID. Pay the application fees via M-Pesa pay bill number 270988. Your ID is the account number. 2,000 shillings is the charge for a postgraduate. You can also deposit in the bank accounts provided on the website. Then email all the above to apply@mku.ac.ke.